The gravy was still warm when my son looked me in the eye and said, "That seat's for my father-in-law." Still, I smiled, folding my napkin like nothing cracked inside me. As the turkey steam rose, so did the silence, thick, seasoned with insult. While they passed the wine around me, I tasted every year I paid for this table. The same chair I built tradition in had become their favor token, and I was no longer the guest of honor. That's when I reserved him room 7 at the motel, with no turn-down service. All right, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor, subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. Carolyn's car tires crunch over the gravel as she pulls into the driveway, her hands steady on the wheel. She glances at the cranberry crumble resting on the passenger seat, wrapped tightly in foil. The tart scent, a holiday signature, is already starting to fill the small cabin of the car. She doesn't look up as the house comes into view. A cozy little place with twinkling lights, wreaths, and the familiar hum of holiday bustle inside. Her son's place, her home for so many years, but not anymore. The door swings open before Carolyn can even knock, Kelsey's pristine face already in a forced smile. "Oh, Mom, come in. We've been waiting for you," Kelsey says, though her voice barely rises to the level of sincerity. She doesn't move to help with the cranberry crumble or the other dish Carolyn's carrying. Instead, she steps aside, her heels clicking sharply on the wood floor as she lets Carolyn enter. Carolyn says nothing. She's used to it. The empty, performative warmth of Kelsey, the way it all looks so perfect. On the surface, anyway. She steps into the dining room, her eyes immediately scanning the table. The usual spread is already in place. A long wooden table with candles flickering, mashed potatoes piled high, roasted vegetables, and a golden brown turkey resting at the center. But something is off. 8 seats. For 9 people. Her stomach tightens. Her eyes fall to the place setting at the head of the table, where a gold-embossed name card reads, "Grandad D. Rogers' seat." Of course. Carolyn's lips press together, eyes flicking to her son Nathan, who is standing just behind her, looking at her with something like guilt. "Where should I sit?" she asks, her voice low and cool. Nathan stammers, caught off guard. We just thought, you wouldn't mind the card table?" he mutters, his eyes darting away from hers. He's already in that defensive posture, the one that says he's trying to please everyone and failing, miserably. Kelsey, standing beside him, forces a soft, rehearsed smile. "It's just temporary, Mom. You know how it is with space. But we've set up a place for you." She motions vaguely to the side, where a small, round card table is set up in the corner by the window. The chair is too small, not quite matching the rest. It's as though she'd been an afterthought in this place, even at the family dinner table. Carolyn doesn't react immediately. She just watches Kelsey, her eyes calculating. She's been in this position before, more times than she cares to count, when the family dynamics have shifted, and she's been left behind. She stands perfectly still for a long moment, then slowly places the cranberry crumble on the countertop. "I see," Carolyn says, her tone as dry as the autumn air outside. She turns toward the card table, but not before catching Eli's eyes. Her grandson stands there, silent as always, watching. There's a kind of knowing there, in the way his gaze lingers on her, and she gives him a small nod. One only he can understand. Roger's booming voice breaks the silence, a rich baritone echoing through the room. He raises his glass of red wine, his expression filled with self-importance. "To blended families done right," he says, his voice carrying over the hum of the conversation around the table, his eyes scanning the room like a conqueror. Carolyn's grip tightens on the edge of the counter, the words cutting through her. Blended families. That's what they've become. She bites her lip to keep from saying something sharp, something cutting. Instead, She takes a step toward the card table, her movements slow, deliberate. The others don't notice her as she slides into the chair that barely fits her. It's smaller, uncomfortable, but she doesn't care. Let them have their show. Let them play at family, at tradition, at doing it right. She's done with it. Carolyn picks up her wine glass, the red liquid swirling inside, and for a brief moment she almost smiles. The chair may be small, but her presence in this room is anything but. Her eyes flicker toward Roger, who's still gloating, still basking in his own self-congratulation. Her lips twitch ever so slightly, and in the silence of her small, isolated corner, she knows. This is just the beginning. The cracks are already showing. And Carolyn Reese never forgets when someone tries to erase her. Carolyn stands in the kitchen, her back to the warmth of the oven as she arranges her ingredients with a quiet, meticulous precision. The cranberry crumble is cooling on the counter, but her mind is elsewhere. She doesn't need to look at the time to know that it's too early to go to bed, yet too late to do anything that feels like peace. The house has grown quiet after the chaos of dinner. Kelsey's laughter, the sharp clink of silverware, Roger's bellowing voice. All of it has faded into the soft murmur of distant conversation and the occasional hiss of the dishwasher. She takes a breath, then grabs her purse from the chair by the door. The cool night air greets her as she steps outside, and she locks the door behind her with a satisfying click. The stars are dim above, the air thin and biting, but she moves with purpose, walking briskly to her car. She doesn't hurry, though. No, she's too old for haste. There's a certain calm to what she's about to do. Her car engine hums to life, and she drives, her headlights cutting through the night. She doesn't need to think much about where she's going. She's already decided. When she pulls into the small motel parking lot 2 blocks away from Nathan's house, the neon sign flickers in the corner of her eye. Vacancy. It's perfect. She parks the car with practiced precision, the tires grinding softly against the gravel. The place is nothing special, just a collection of modest single-story rooms arranged around a central courtyard. The kind of place where families stay when they're too tired to drive further, or maybe when they're running away from something. The motel lobby smells faintly of pine cleaner, and the woman behind the counter looks up from her phone, her eyes briefly scanning Carolyn with an unspoken judgment. Carolyn offers a brief smile, and the woman, unimpressed, grabs the guest book and asks for a name. Drummond, Carolyn says smoothly. Roger Drummond. The clerk raises an eyebrow but says nothing, scribbling down the name. Carolyn doesn't flinch. Roger won't be the one to check in, but he doesn't need to know that. She hands over a credit card and waits as the clerk taps away at the computer. It takes longer than Carolyn expects, but she doesn't rush. Time seems to stretch in these little liminal spaces, and she feels no need to fill it. Here's your key, the woman says, sliding it across the counter along with an invoice. Room 12. I've adjusted the AC to your liking. Carolyn nods once, quietly, and takes the key. Her fingers brush the paper. The transaction complete. She pauses for a moment, looking down at the small packet in her hand, the receipt, the key card, the invoice. A simple transaction, but it feels like a silent contract. As she walks back to her car, she feels a faint smile tug at her lips. She doesn't know how this will play out, but the plan is already in motion. Her phone buzzes in her pocket, pulling her from the quiet thrill of the evening's work. Nathan's name flashes across the screen, and she doesn't hesitate to swipe it open. Hope you weren't upset. Nathan's text reads, the words almost polite, a little too careful. It's just a lot to juggle. Carolyn reads the message twice before tapping her reply into the phone, but she doesn't send it. Instead, she locks the screen, the silence between them growing thicker, denser. She'll say nothing. Not yet. Instead, she drives home, slowly, savoring the cold air and the feel of control in her chest. Back at her house, Carolyn sets the packet down on the counter. The motel key, the receipt, tiny symbols of a decision she knows will leave ripples. She doesn't feel the need to explain herself to Nathan. After all, isn't this what they've made her? The invisible? The forgotten? She picks up her phone again, but this time, it's Kelsey's post that catches her eye. The words are plastered across an image of a holiday dinner, the table set, her bright smile beaming at the camera, Nathan's hand resting on her shoulder. Family isn't about blood, it's about energy. The words almost make her laugh. She knows this game. The need to present the perfect, polished version of their lives, their image of family. A hollow vessel filled with pretend warmth. But Carolyn doesn't need that. Not anymore. Her fingers hover over the screen. She thinks of replying, of saying something sharp, something true. But she doesn't. Instead, she taps the screen, saving the image. She doesn't need to explain herself either. Not yet. Not when she's already a step ahead. She moves to the kitchen, taking a small bowl from the cabinet. Her fingers, practiced and precise, begin to mix the ingredients for tomorrow's batch of shortbread. She'll make her own traditions. She'll reclaim the quiet strength she's always had but never used. There's a glimmer of something in her eyes as she stirs. Something that feels like the first stirrings of victory. Marla's voice cuts through her thoughts, as though she's already standing there in the kitchen. Single bed or sofa sleeper? Carolyn grins, the plan unfolding in her mind. Crank the AC and make it noisy, she mutters to herself. She knows where she's going, and when the time comes, she'll make sure Nathan, Kelsey, and Roger can hear every second of it. The house is quieter now. The last remnants of the holiday meal are tucked away in containers, the clink of silverware and chatter now replaced by the soft hum of the refrigerator. Carolyn, however, is wide awake. In the silence, she moves as she always does when something weighs on her. Carefully, methodically, almost too quietly. Her gaze falls on the small desk in the corner of the kitchen. It's a place she's used for years, a spot where lists are made, plans are hatched. There, sitting in front of her, is the heavy leather-bound notebook she's kept since 2002. Holiday Expenses, 2002-2022. The edges of the pages are frayed, the cover worn from years of use. She runs her finger over it for a moment, a little smile curling at the corners of her lips. She's been keeping track of this, of them, for as long as she can remember. Each year, a tally of gifts given, repairs made, dinners hosted. And at the end of each list, a quiet note, how much Nathan owes, how much he never paid back. Carolyn opens the notebook carefully, turning to the first page where the lists start. They're neat and precise, written in her steady hand. The receipts are tucked between the pages like old memories, each one labeled Christmas 2002, Thanksgiving 2004, Easter 2010. Each year, each sacrifice. She flips through the pages, the familiar dates rushing by, until she reaches the last one, the most recent holiday, the one that started all of this. Her eyes narrow as she begins to circle the amounts Nathan has never repaid. The small loans for new tires when his car broke down, the extra groceries when Kelsey's parents came to visit, the gifts for Eli's birthday that were never covered. It's all there, laid out like a ledger. He'd been so careful, so polite, never asking directly, but always there, with his hands out, and his promises always just a little too vague. Carolyn's finger trails down the list, the years blending into one long, continuous line of unspoken debts. Her grip tightens on the pen as she circles the most recent one, $1,000, for a family emergency. No explanation. No repayment. She flicks through the rest of the notebook, the pages becoming thicker, each one heavier with the weight of unmet promises. Carolyn's lip curls in frustration. But it's more than that. It's something deeper, something more deliberate. She's had enough. As if on cue, the doorbell rings, snapping her out of the haze. She puts the notebook aside and moves toward the door with measured steps. She knows exactly who it is before she even opens it. Marla stands on the other side, her arms crossed, her expression the no-nonsense one Carolyn knows too well. "Brought the pie," Marla says, her voice as blunt as ever. She steps inside, handing over a tin of fresh pie wrapped in paper. It's still warm, the crust golden and flaky. "And I think it's time we got down to business," she adds, scanning the room. Carolyn doesn't say anything, just takes the pie and sets it down on the counter. The two of them stand in the kitchen in a kind of comfortable silence. They both know what's coming. Marla moves toward the desk, her gaze immediately falling on the open notebook. "You're still doing this?" she asks, her tone more curious than critical. Carolyn nods once, her eyes distant, focused on the list she'd just made. "It's all here. Every single thing they owe me. But it's not just money anymore. They've taken enough." Marla exhales sharply, then nods in understanding. "So what's next?" Carolyn pauses, considering her words carefully. "Next, we make sure they know what happens when you forget what's been given." Without waiting for Marla's response, Carolyn pulls open a drawer, rifling through it for some blank sheets of paper. She grabs a few, then picks up a pen. She writes quickly, efficiently, the words flowing from her as if she's done this 1,000 times before. A contract. A guest policy. For Nathan and Kelsey. Terms of occupancy. She doesn't pause, doesn't falter as she writes the legalese. The words come to her naturally. A clause for respectful behavior. No raised voices, no condescension. A line for contribution, specifying that anyone who expects to sit at her table must bring something of their own to contribute. No more free rides. She even includes a section on emergency loans, specifying that repayment must occur within 30 days, with interest. Marla watches her, arms crossed, a smirk creeping onto her face as she reads over Carolyn's shoulder. "Making it official, huh?" she says, her voice thick with amusement. "They're gonna love this." Carolyn doesn't answer right away. She finishes the contract, then carefully sets the pen down and lets the ink dry. She prints a few place cards to go along with it, each one bearing Nathan and Kelsey's names, and a little legal footnote at the bottom. It's all coming together, piece by piece. Her fingers trace the neat lettering of the place cards before she turns to Marla. "Let's see how much they like contracts," she says softly, a quiet satisfaction in her voice. She arranges the cards carefully, one by one, beside the notebook, imagining the look on Nathan's face when he gets his. The feeling of power, of having the upper hand for the first time in a long while, settles deep in her chest. She's not just hosting dinner anymore. She's hosting a new kind of order, one that they'll have to follow. Marla watches her with an approving nod, but there's something else in her gaze. Something sharp. "You've set the table, Carolyn. Now, let's see if they show up." Carolyn smiles, a quiet, knowing smile. She'll make sure they do, and when they do, they'll sit at her table, not as equals, but as guests. And they'll remember who made the rules. The last line of the guest policy is all that needs to be added now. Failure to comply will result in immediate eviction. Carolyn Reese doesn't do second chances. The kitchen is still, save for the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the rhythmic tap of Carolyn's fingers against the desk. The papers in front of her are neatly aligned, the ink fresh. But it's the contract she's drafting that holds her attention. Holiday hosting agreement, she titles it. Her pen moves across the paper with a steady, deliberate motion, filling each section with clauses she knows will be impossible to ignore. The terms are simple but sharp, like a finely tuned instrument. Occupancy limits. 2 overnight guests only. No exceptions. Behavior clause. Any disruptive or disrespectful actions will result in immediate expulsion. There's even a provision about gifts, stipulating that anyone who wants to attend must bring something, whether it's food, drink, or, in a pinch, a gesture of goodwill. No more free rides. She pauses after writing the final word, the weight of it settling around her. It's not just a holiday agreement, it's a statement, a declaration, a line drawn firmly in the sand. The house has always been hers, but now, she's laying the rules for the world she's willing to share. No more boundaries crossed. With a deep breath, Carolyn picks up her phone and composes an email. Her fingers hover over the screen for a moment, but she's already decided. The subject line reads, "Clarification for future gatherings." She attaches the document and hits send. Nathan's reply is almost immediate. "Is this necessary?" Carolyn reads the words, but doesn't answer right away. She taps her fingers against the desk, letting the silence linger. Nathan never liked confrontation, never liked to acknowledge what he didn't want to deal with. But this is different. This is real. And this time, she's made sure he can't ignore it. She sets the phone down, letting the quiet fill the room again, and then she hears Marla's voice behind her, as sharp and clear as ever. "You know this'll start a fire." Carolyn smiles faintly, a dry, knowing smile. "I packed marshmallows." Marla chuckles, her eyes glinting with approval. She's been with Carolyn through every upheaval, every painful moment, and now, it's her steady presence that makes Carolyn feel less alone in this quiet rebellion. Marla steps into the room and crosses to the counter, her gaze flicking over the agreement Carolyn's just written. "You've drawn the line, huh?" Carolyn nods slowly, then rises from her seat. "I'm done being the one they walk all over." She folds the paper with careful hands and places it into an envelope, sealing it with deliberate precision. Then, as if the moment calls for it, she heads toward the door. "I'll drop a copy off at the HOA," Carolyn says, her voice firm, yet almost amused. She steps outside, the cool night air biting at her cheeks as she makes her way down the steps to her car. Marla follows, calling over her shoulder. "Just don't make it too formal, okay?" Carolyn just grins, a flash of mischief in her eyes. "They'll know I'm serious." The drive to the HOA office is quick. The building sits at the edge of the neighborhood, tucked behind tall trees and well-kept lawns, as if it's been crafted to look as pleasant as possible. But tonight, it feels almost empty, abandoned in the growing darkness. Carolyn parks in front of the entrance, grabs the envelope, and strides toward the glass doors with purpose. She doesn't need to knock. The office is open, the receptionist sitting behind her desk, barely looking up. Carolyn slides the envelope across the counter. The woman's eyes glance at the address before she opens it, her eyebrows lifting slightly in surprise. "House rules?" Carolyn says, her voice steady, "for the upcoming holidays. Thought the neighborhood might want a heads up." The receptionist blinks a few times before offering a half-hearted smile. "Of course. I'll make sure this gets to the right person." Carolyn doesn't wait for any more pleasantries. She turns and walks out of the office, feeling the familiar thrill of control settle deep in her chest. This time, things will be different. She doesn't look back. By the time she returns home, the house is quiet again, only the sound of the wind outside filling the spaces. But the silence is different now, sharper, more intentional. Carolyn steps through the door, pauses to drop her keys in the dish by the entrance, and moves toward the kitchen. Then the doorbell rings. It's unexpected, and she freezes for a moment. The evening was supposed to wind down, the tension having already started to loosen its grip. But then, a voice from behind the door. Roger. She knows it without a doubt. It's not Nathan, not Kelsey. It's Roger, the one person who always had a way of showing up at the worst times, as if his very presence demanded attention. Carolyn doesn't move immediately. Her hand rests on the door frame, her eyes scanning the kitchen as if she could draw comfort from the stillness. She knows this will be a confrontation. She knows this will be messy. But she doesn't care anymore. She's drawn the line. With a deep breath, she walks to the door and opens it. Roger stands there, a frown on his face, his broad shoulders almost filling the frame. "I need to speak with you," he says, his voice more commanding than she expects. Carolyn doesn't blink. "The rules," she says, her voice low and steady, "are non-negotiable." She waits, her heart steady, knowing full well what's about to unfold. And for the first time in years, she's no longer afraid. The air outside is sharp with winter's bite, the darkening sky settling over Asheville like a heavy blanket. Carolyn stands at her front door, her hand still resting on the handle, her fingers gripping the edge of the wood. Roger's broad figure fills the doorway, but his presence feels out of place. He's a bull in a china shop, always coming with his demands, his expectations. And this time, it's no different. "Carolyn, I need to speak with you," Roger begins, his voice deeper than usual, almost forced in its authority. Carolyn doesn't flinch. She simply meets his eyes with an unreadable expression, the weight of her new rules already settled in the quiet tension between them. "The rules," she says, her voice measured, cold, "are non-negotiable." Roger blinks, his frown deepening. He shifts his weight from one foot to the other, his stance wide and commanding, but she doesn't step aside. She's not afraid of him. Not anymore. "I'm not here for this," he growls. "This whole contract nonsense. What's your endgame, huh? This is supposed to be family. You're making it personal." "Family?" Carolyn repeats, her lip curling slightly. "You don't get to redefine that word for me, Roger. Not anymore." There's a beat of silence. Roger looks past her, his eyes scanning the hallway as if he's waiting for something. Anything that might give him an opening. But there's nothing. The house is empty, save for them. And Carolyn has drawn the line firmly. "Look," he says, exasperated. "This is ridiculous. You can't just move the goalposts like this. This isn't how family works. You don't just kick people out." Carolyn's eyes narrow, a flicker of something almost predatory in them. "You're the one who came here uninvited. You're the one who thought you could just waltz in and pick the seat you wanted." Her voice remains calm, steady. "I made sure you had accommodations." Roger stares at her for a long moment, the realization dawning slowly, his mind struggling to catch up. "Accommodations?" he repeats, disbelief creeping into his tone. Carolyn steps aside, her hand sweeping toward the door like a gesture of invitation. Only it's not the kind of invitation he wants. "I made sure it's senior-friendly," she adds dryly. Her lips quirk upward, just enough to show the subtle malice. "A room 2 blocks down at the motel. Room 12. It's perfect for someone who can't handle the pressure of a real family dinner." Roger's face goes a shade paler. His mouth opens, then closes, as if the words he's about to say don't quite make it past his throat. For the first time, he looks disarmed, not from a sense of surprise, but because he realizes the full extent of what Carolyn's done. You did this?" Roger hisses, his voice cutting through the stillness. "You think this is a joke? You think I'm going to take this lying down?" Carolyn doesn't respond immediately. She watches him, the weight of her words heavy in the air. The truth of it hangs between them, like a weapon just waiting to be wielded. Then the sound of Kelsey's heels clicks sharply in the hallway. She appears in the doorway, her eyes scanning the scene with a look of irritation and disbelief. "What's going on here?" she demands, her voice tight, defensive. She steps forward, the tension rising with each of her movements. "What is this? Why is Roger standing here?" Carolyn looks at her, then back at Roger, as though the pair of them are simply characters in a play she's been forced to direct. "Oh, Kelsey, didn't you know?" she asks, her voice sickly sweet. "Roger's accommodations are ready. I made sure to book him a room just for him, 2 blocks away. A lovely little motel with a view of nothing, just what he deserves after his little performance tonight." Kelsey's eyes narrow, the confusion twisting into something more like outrage. "You've made this really uncomfortable, Carolyn," she spits, her voice high, tight with anger. Carolyn doesn't flinch. She leans slightly against the doorframe, watching Kelsey, as if savoring this moment of control. "So did you," she responds, the words slow and deliberate. "Just quieter." Kelsey takes a step forward, her eyes flashing with that look of indignation Carolyn knows all too well. But Carolyn doesn't move. She simply watches her daughter-in-law's angry gestures, the way she tries to form her next words without fully grasping the depth of the situation. Carolyn knows how it's going to end. She's seen this dance before. Nathan's voice floats from the other room. It's faint, but it carries the desperation he always wears in situations like this. He steps into the hallway, his hand reaching out toward his mother, his face strained. "Let's not do this," he pleads, his voice cracking slightly, as though he thinks that will make her soften. Carolyn turns to look at him, her eyes steady. Her heart doesn't race. She isn't moved by the pleading in his voice anymore. This has gone on too long. The silence between them stretches before she speaks. "We already did," she says, flatly, and with finality. For a moment, there's nothing. Just the stillness in the air. The weight of what she said sinking in. Roger's face twists with confusion and disbelief, but it's Kelsey's sudden sharp exhale that fills the space. She looks between her husband and mother-in-law, her chest rising and falling with anger, helplessness. Then Roger shoves his suitcase further into the hallway, his fingers tight around the handle as he looks at Carolyn one last time. His eyes are wide with disbelief, a touch of hurt beneath the anger. "You've got to be kidding me," he mutters, his voice thick with insult. "I'm not," Carolyn responds quietly, her gaze unwavering as he storms past her. He leaves, but not before one last glare at her. A look that's less about intimidation now, and more about confusion. He thought he understood the game, but he never did. As the door clicks shut behind him, Carolyn stands still for a long moment, watching the empty space where he'd been. The house feels quieter somehow, more settled, and as she exhales, a soft, almost imperceptible smile tugs at the corners of her lips. She's done. The table is set, the same as every year, but something is different now. The candles flicker softly, the polished silver gleams under the dim lights, and the smell of ham fills the air. But Carolyn can't shake the feeling that it's all just a well-constructed illusion, a show they're putting on, and she's the only one who knows the truth behind the facade. She stands at the head of the table, her hands steady as she carves the ham, each slice falling away with a quiet precision that mirrors her thoughts. The blade cuts clean, effortless. Kelsey sits to her left, her glass of wine untouched, the stem of the glass held delicately between her fingers. Her gaze flickers from the table to Carolyn and then back again, her posture stiff, as if holding herself together by sheer force of will. Her silence is more telling than any words could be. Nathan sits across from her, his eyes glued to his phone, his fingers scrolling idly. The occasional buzz of a text message goes unnoticed, or perhaps it's just easier for him to pretend everything is fine when he's buried in a screen. It's the same behavior that Carolyn's seen so many times, a refusal to engage, to acknowledge what's broken, until it's too late to fix. Eli, seated beside her, watches quietly, his small hands folded neatly in his lap. He's the only one who's truly present, his gaze shifting between the adults at the table, taking in everything without speaking. Carolyn glances at him, and for a moment, she feels the weight of all the years she's been overlooked. A silence hangs in the air, thick and uncomfortable. And then, Eli's voice cuts through it. A question so innocent and clear that it lingers in the air like a bell tolling for something lost. Can Grandma say grace? The request, simple as it is, hangs in the air, awkward. Kelsey shifts in her seat, her eyes narrowing, but she doesn't speak. Nathan doesn't look up from his phone. Carolyn takes a deep breath, the stillness of the moment settling around her like a cloak. She places the carving knife down with deliberate slowness and looks across the table, her gaze steady, unblinking. She feels the tension, the eyes on her, expecting her to play the part they've assigned her, to be the ever-pliant mother, the compliant grandmother. Instead, she speaks, her voice low but clear, cutting through the discomfort like a blade. "May we be honest with each other this year," she says, her words falling into the silence like stones. It's not a prayer, it's a command. The room falls even quieter, as if everyone is holding their breath, unsure how to respond. There's a pause. A long one. Kelsey shifts, her jaw tight, as if she's about to say something, but nothing comes out. Instead, she picks up her wine glass and takes a delicate sip, the clink of the glass against the table echoing in the quiet room. Her fingers tremble ever so slightly. Nathan, his eyes still fixed on his phone, lets out a soft, disinterested sigh, but it's clear to Carolyn that he's tuned everything out, just as he always does when things get uncomfortable. He's checked out, physically present but mentally miles away. Carolyn doesn't let the silence stretch too long. She turns to Eli, smiling faintly. "It's all right, sweetheart. You wanted honesty, and we'll have it." Her smile is small, but there's a depth to it now. Something that feels like power slowly building, like the quiet force of a storm brewing just beneath the surface. Marla, who has been sitting quietly at the other end of the table, raises her glass. It's a soft clink, but it carries weight. "To reclaiming tradition," she says, her voice light, but there's an edge to it. It's a toast to Carolyn's strength, to the way she's taken back control of what was once hers to begin with. And it's a signal to everyone in the room that they may not get to dictate the terms anymore. The tension in the room doesn't dissipate entirely, but it shifts. There's something unsaid hanging in the air, and it's heavier than the silence that had come before. Carolyn picks up her glass of water and takes a small sip, the coolness of it a sharp contrast to the warmth of the room. She looks at her family, her son, his wife, her grandson, and she knows, with absolute certainty, that things are never going to be the same. The lines have been drawn. The game has changed. Her eyes flicker toward Kelsey, whose face is set, lips pressed together in a tight, unreadable line. Kelsey's eyes dart toward her husband, but Nathan doesn't meet her gaze. He's still focused on the screen of his phone, trying to ignore the heaviness in the air. Carolyn exhales slowly, and as she reaches for the breadbasket, she feels a weight lifting. Not because the battle has been won. No, this is just the beginning. But because she no longer has to pretend. Her son and his wife may not understand the full weight of what she's done, but she does, and that's enough for now. The night stretches on, but it feels like it's already over. Carolyn knows that the silence between them is a new kind of victory, a quiet rebellion against all the years she's been dismissed, forgotten, silenced. And no one in this room, not even her son, can unmake what's been set in motion. The silence of the house presses in on Nathan as he sits at the kitchen table, the air still thick with the remnants of their strained dinner. The faint clink of silverware being cleaned by Marla echoes in the background, her movements rhythmic, almost detached. Carolyn, standing by the counter, watches him with a quiet intensity as he opens the envelope, her expression unreadable. Inside the envelope is a neatly folded letter, its edges crisp and smooth. Nathan's fingers tremble just slightly as he unfolds it. The words on the page are sharp, deliberate, every line perfectly drafted. He swallows once before he begins reading, each word sinking deeper into him like stones dropped into water, sending ripples through the quiet chaos of his thoughts. The letter outlines the new household policies, its header bold, like a declaration from some distant kingdom, one that no longer serves his needs or expectations. Guest limits. Only 2 overnight guests may stay per visit, with prior approval required. Nathan reads these lines, his stomach twisting, his mind barely processing what it means. Contribution logs. Each guest is expected to bring something of value, whether food, drink, or assistance in preparation. Failure to contribute will result in immediate eviction. A sharp breath escapes him as he continues reading, his eyes scanning over the lines, his mind struggling to catch up with the language of boundaries. The final clause catches his eye. Disrespect will void all future invitations. The sentence is plain, direct. There's no mistaking it. Carolyn's words, her actions, are not just for this year. They are forever. He sets the letter down on the table, his hand still gripping the paper, feeling the weight of the finality in it. The room seems smaller now, like he's drowning in the weight of the words. The space between him and his mother, now a chasm that feels impossible to cross. Kelsey, who had been pacing at the other end of the kitchen, stops. Her face is pale, eyes narrowed as she takes in the sight of Nathan holding the letter. She exhales slowly, her voice tight, like a rubber band pulled too far. "She's making this legal?" she asks, the disbelief coloring her words, as if the very idea of Carolyn asserting control over something as sacred as family is beyond comprehension. Carolyn, her back to them as she pours herself a glass of water, doesn't flinch at Kelsey's question. She knows the answer all too well. Her voice cuts through the tension with calm precision. "No," she says, her words measured but unyielding. "I'm making it clear. It's not the law. Not in any formal sense. But it doesn't need to be. The rules Carolyn has put in place aren't about paperwork or legal precedents. They're about control, about taking back what was always hers to begin with. They're a reminder to Nathan and Kelsey that they don't get to dictate the terms anymore. They don't get to decide how far they can push before they break." The air in the kitchen thickens as the gravity of her statement hangs in the space between them. Nathan shifts in his seat, a slight edge of frustration starting to twist through his features. He wants to argue, to protest. But the truth is there. He knows it. He knows Carolyn won't back down, that she's not the woman who would relent. Not now. The quiet tension in the room is suffocating, and he knows he's trapped in it. Kelsey, unable to hide her irritation any longer, crosses her arms, her eyes burning with an unspoken anger. But it's not the anger of someone who's won. It's the anger of someone caught off guard, unable to control the situation anymore. "This isn't how it works, Carolyn," she mutters, though her voice lacks the force it once had. "You can't just make rules for everything." Carolyn doesn't even look at her. She doesn't need to. The rules are already set, already in motion. The stakes have been raised, and Carolyn has made sure they can't ignore it. Marla, still quietly collecting the dishes, doesn't speak for a moment, but then she lets out a soft whistle, her movements smooth as she gathers the plates. She catches Carolyn's eye, her lips quirking into a knowing smile. "Well," Marla says, her voice lighter than the tension in the room suggests. "I think we finally got their attention." Carolyn doesn't smile back, but there's something like a spark in her eyes. She doesn't need to acknowledge Marla's words. The change has already begun. Nathan leans back in his chair, the letter still open on the table, his gaze unfocused as if he's seeing something beyond the words, something he can't quite grasp. Kelsey, still standing, bites her lip. Her body tense, as if she's waiting for something to give, waiting for Carolyn to slip, to falter. But Carolyn doesn't waver. She won't. The silence stretches between them, and she knows that she's already won. The power dynamics have shifted. This moment is hers, and no amount of pleading, no tantrum, no desperate gesture will change that now. The lines are drawn. This time, the rules are final. "Marla," Carolyn says, her voice breaking the silence like the toll of a bell, "let's finish dinner." Marla smiles knowingly, setting down a stack of dishes with a soft clink. She starts to hum quietly as she moves about the kitchen. There's a warmth there, but it's the warmth of something hard-earned, a slow-building fire that won't burn out easily. And Carolyn, still standing at the center of it all, feels the weight of the room settle around her. She has set the table. She has made it clear. And now, they must all follow the rules. The game has changed. 8. The image they cared about. The notification comes in just after Carolyn has finished cleaning the last of the dishes. It's a small ping on her phone, a soft buzz that feels almost out of place in the quiet of the kitchen. She picks it up without thinking, her fingers curling around the screen as if already anticipating what's waiting for her. It's Kelsey. The name flashes on the screen with a new post, an image, a video, a carefully curated moment. The words, "Setting boundaries is beautiful even when others make it hard," accompany the reel, which plays automatically. Kelsey, standing in front of a fireplace, smiling serenely with a glass of wine in her hand. Her eyes gleaming with that carefully practiced warmth. Behind her, Nathan stands, half hidden in the background, his hands tucked into his pockets. They look perfect. They always look perfect. And yet, there's something about the smile that Carolyn recognizes instantly, forced. It's a message. It's not just about the image or the caption or the crafted smiles. It's a subtle jab, a thinly veiled critique of Carolyn's actions, of the rules she's set, the boundaries she's enforced. Carolyn can feel it in her bones. She doesn't need to look at the post for long to know what it is. This isn't about energy or family or any of the other buzzwords Kelsey hides behind. It's about undermining her. It's about making her the villain in their carefully constructed narrative. Her thumb hovers over the screen for a long moment. She could comment. She could respond, say something sharp. But Carolyn doesn't need to. She's already several steps ahead. With a quiet breath, she takes a screenshot. The soft tap of her finger against the screen feels almost triumphant. She doesn't need to fight back directly. She's building her case, piece by piece. The folder on her phone titled "Documented Gaslighting" fills one more slot with evidence of Kelsey's subtle manipulations. The silent power plays meant to paint Carolyn as the antagonist. Carolyn doesn't flinch as she presses save, the image settling into the folder like a neat little piece of a puzzle. She knows what's happening here. She's seen this game before. Kelsey is trying to shift the narrative, trying to frame her actions as overreaching, too much, too harsh. But Carolyn knows the truth of it. And she's not about to let Kelsey, or anyone, rewrite the story. Nathan's name flashes on her phone a moment later, another notification popping up. This one isn't public. It's personal. "Can we talk without tone?" The words are polite, but there's an edge to them, an undertone of frustration that Carolyn can almost hear in his mind, even if the words themselves remain neutral. Carolyn stares at the message, her finger hovering over the screen. She could reply. She could send something curt, something cutting. But instead, she takes a long breath, feeling the shift in herself. This isn't about winning an argument anymore. This is about clarity. And she's already been clear. She opens the message and types, her fingers moving without hesitation. Only if we speak from facts, not feelings. She hits send without waiting for his response. Setting the phone down on the counter beside her, the glow of the screen dimming in the quiet kitchen. The weight of the conversation hangs in the air, but Carolyn doesn't let it settle. She doesn't need to listen to the back and forth, the passive-aggressive apologies, or the attempts to convince her that she's the one at fault. She's been through this too many times, and she's done. From the other side of the kitchen, she hears Marla humming softly to herself, moving about the kitchen as she arranges a few things on the counter. She glances up briefly, meeting Carolyn's eyes, and the two share a brief, knowing look. "Legal templates, huh?" Marla says, half joking, half serious. She's already rifling through a drawer, pulling out a few sheets of blank paper, her fingers quickly forming neat, almost professional-looking lines. Carolyn raises an eyebrow, a faint smile curving her lips. "Holiday Agreement, 2024. She responds dryly. "Just in case. I need to make sure they really understand the rules." Marla laughs softly, a sound of genuine approval. "I like it," she says, tapping the edge of a pen thoughtfully. "It's a game changer. You've set the stage, Carolyn. Now we make sure the audience doesn't forget their lines." Carolyn exhales slowly, leaning back against the counter, her mind already shifting toward what comes next. This isn't just about a dinner or a moment in time. It's about something bigger, something that can't be undone. She's taken back control, and now, the world they had been forcing her to live in has changed. She's not just a participant anymore. She's the one writing the script. She picks up the folder from the counter, her fingers brushing the edges of the papers inside. The weight of it feels substantial, significant. This is just the beginning. And Carolyn Reese? She's ready for whatever comes next. The late afternoon light spills through the windows, casting long shadows across the kitchen. Carolyn sits at the table, the weight of her next move heavy in her hands. The papers in front of her are the final steps in a plan she's been working toward for years. Years of compromise, years of silence, all leading to this moment. Her pen hovers above the paper, the black ink a symbol of the finality she's about to impose. The estate draft is clear, cold, and simple. Nathan and Kelsey's names are crossed out, not with anger, but with something quieter, something that speaks of a decision that has been made, a line drawn that cannot be undone. The name that replaces theirs is Eli's. She's already written the gratitude clause into the will, a clause that links their future inheritance to their behavior. Only those who show respect, who understand the value of what's been given, will benefit from what's to come. Carolyn is under no illusion. This isn't about money. This isn't about stuff. This is about teaching them a lesson that begins and ends with respect. Her eyes flicker over the papers again, the weight of her choices starting to settle in. She's done more than rewrite the future of her estate. She's created a fortress around it. A home protection trust is now in place, and it's as airtight as she can make it. Only 2 people have keys to the house now. Marla, her steadfast friend, and Eli, the one person in this tangled mess of family who's always been there for her. Carolyn leans back in her chair, her gaze focused on the papers, the sharp angles of her decisions cutting through the room. The power she holds now is more than just legal, it's emotional. She knows Nathan won't understand, and Kelsey, even less so. But it doesn't matter. This was never about their understanding. It was about sending a message. And Carolyn has made sure that message is loud and clear. Her phone buzzes in the other room, breaking the quiet tension that settled over her like a heavy fog. She picks it up slowly, and there it is. Nathan's name flashing on the screen. A message from him. The words are terse, almost frantic. I know what you've done. Is this really necessary? A quiet smile curls at the corner of Carolyn's mouth. She taps out a response, her fingers moving swiftly, decisively. It was necessary. It's not about the seat. It was about the message. As she presses send, her thoughts drift to what will happen next. She knows this is only the beginning of what's coming. Nathan and Kelsey won't take this lying down. They'll fight. They'll try to turn it all around. But Carolyn is ready for that. The power dynamic has shifted irrevocably. The doorbell rings. Carolyn stands up slowly, her pulse steady, almost imperceptible. She knows exactly who it is before she even opens the door. Nathan stands on the other side, his face a mix of disbelief and something darker. Resentment, maybe. Or fear. He's wearing his usual defensive posture, the one that tells Carolyn everything she needs to know. He's here for answers. But he's already made up his mind about what he thinks she's done. You really did it, Nathan says, his voice strained, barely above a whisper. You'd disinherit me over a dinner? His eyes are wide, the words hanging in the air between them like a challenge. Carolyn doesn't flinch. She looks at him, meeting his gaze with a clarity he's never seen before. It wasn't about the seat, she repeats, her voice low, almost gentle in its finality. It was about the message. And you heard it loud and clear, Nathan. He's silent for a moment, looking like he's trying to piece the situation together, his hands fumbling at his sides. You're being unreasonable. You're making this a war over nothing. Carolyn shakes her head, her expression unwavering. You were the one who declared it, Nathan. When you chose to side with her over me, when you ignored everything I've done for you, it's not about a dinner. It's about what you value. Nathan takes a step back, his eyes flicking to the side, his mind racing. He's trying to digest it, but it's too much. His lips tremble, but he can't find the words to argue with her anymore. The power dynamic between them has shifted, and Carolyn has won, even if he doesn't fully understand how or why. Before he can say another word, Carolyn turns her back on him, the finality of her movement making it clear that the conversation is over. Go ahead, she says softly, not looking at him. Call your lawyer. See if they can do anything about it. Nathan stands in the doorway for a long moment, his eyes darting to the papers in her hand, to the calm certainty in her stance. He wants to lash out, but he can't. The truth has already settled over him like a weight he can't lift. With a sharp, frustrated breath, he turns on his heel and walks away, leaving Carolyn standing at the threshold, her heart steady as ever. Kelsey, who has been lurking in the background, appears in the doorway just as Nathan leaves. She's wearing a mask of defiance, but even through her anger, there's a hint of something else. Fear. She doesn't say anything, just stares at Carolyn as if trying to understand how this quiet, steady woman has taken control of everything. Carolyn meets her gaze, but she doesn't need to say anything. Not anymore. The house is hers. The rules are set, and no one, not Nathan, not Kelsey, can undo what she's done. The game has changed. And this time, Carolyn Reese is the one holding all the cards. The house is still. The remnants of the holiday, now a distant memory, have settled into the quiet rhythm of Carolyn's life. The evening has slipped into a peaceful lull, the weight of the decisions she's made already sinking deep into her bones. She stands in the kitchen, her hands moving with the practiced ease of someone who's been here before, who knows exactly what they're doing. On the counter beside her rests a small wooden box. It's simple in design, nothing flashy, just a smooth, polished surface with an intricate carving etched into the lid. A symbol, perhaps, or a mark of something more significant. Inside, nestled carefully in the fabric lining, is the original deed to the house. Carolyn takes a moment to run her fingers over the wood, a small, almost imperceptible smile tugging at her lips. This is it, the moment she's been working toward. The final step in what she's started. The house has always been hers, but now it belongs to someone else too. Someone who understands the value of it. Someone who has always been there for her in a way no one else has. Eli. She picks up the box, the weight of it in her hands feeling heavier now, as if it carries the gravity of everything she's ever worked for. She walks quietly to the living room, where Eli is sitting, his legs crossed, surrounded by his comics. He looks up as she enters, his eyes bright but not surprised. He's known, in his way, what this is about. Carolyn sits down beside him, the box resting on her lap. "I wanted to give you something," she says, her voice steady, almost soft. Eli tilts his head, watching her closely, and she feels the unspoken understanding between them, the silent acknowledgement that, in this world of shifting allegiances, they are the ones who stand firm. She opens the box slowly, the wood creaking just a little, and reveals the deed to the house. Eli's eyes widen, but he doesn't speak. He just watches her, waiting for the rest. "You don't own it now," Carolyn says, her voice almost a whisper, but there's a strength in it. "But one day, you'll understand how to protect it. This," she gestures to the deed, "isn't just a piece of paper. It's your inheritance, your responsibility. I'm giving you something more than just a home. I'm giving you the tools to protect what's yours." Eli nods slowly, as if he's processing the weight of her words, the meaning behind them. "I already do," he says, his voice soft but firm. Carolyn looks at him, a flicker of something like pride crossing her features. She knows, in this moment, that Eli is the one who will carry this forward. He's the one who understands what it means to protect what's truly valuable. Carolyn takes a deep breath, lifting a folded note from the box. She hands it to Eli, who takes it with careful fingers. The words she's written are short, but they carry a lifetime of wisdom. "Don't let anyone move you off what's rightfully yours." Eli looks up at her, his eyes clear. "I won't," he says, as though there's no question about it. Carolyn feels the weight of his words settle inside her. This isn't just a gift. This is an investment. In him. In the future. In everything she's fought for. As she stands, ready to leave him with the box, the note, and the responsibility that comes with both, she notices Marla standing in the doorway. She's holding a freshly baked pie, the sweet scent of it filling the room. The label on the top reads, "Heirloom Crust," and it's more than just a pie. It's a reminder of the past, of the traditions that have been passed down, even when everything else has changed. Marla walks over and sets the pie down on the table in front of Eli. "For the future," Marla says, her voice light but meaningful. "And for the past, too. You can't have one without the other." Carolyn smiles, a real smile this time, the kind that reaches her eyes. "It's all part of the same story," she says, her gaze lingering on Eli, her pride in him palpable. "And now, you get to write the next chapter." Eli picks up a fork and takes a small bite of the pie, the sweetness of it settling in his mouth. There's a quiet satisfaction in the way he eats, the way he takes this moment for himself. Carolyn watches him, feeling the weight of everything she's done, everything she's left behind. And as she turns to leave, her eyes catch the door that's slightly ajar, a symbol perhaps, of the boundaries that were once so carefully maintained and now lie beyond her reach. The world has shifted, and she's no longer the one on the outside looking in. She's in control now. And Eli, the quiet observer, is the one who will carry the lessons forward. The game has changed once again, and this time, Carolyn has made sure the right hands are holding the cards. The letter sits on Carolyn's desk, its envelope crisp, its contents simple but deliberate. She had written it the night after Nathan's visit, after Kelsey's social media stunt and all the silent battles that had preceded them. The words were carefully chosen, and there was no ambiguity in them. She wasn't angry. Not anymore. She was just done. The game had changed, and they could either play by her rules or not play at all. The letter is a declaration, a boundary drawn, a space carved out that Nathan and Kelsey must now navigate if they wish to be a part of her life again. Dear Nathan and Kelsey, you're welcome next year. If you RSVP, contribute, and don't speak over the host. Best regards, Carolyn Reese. She slides it into a plain envelope, seals it with a final silent decision, and sets it aside. There's no drama in it. No overt emotional charge. Just the quiet strength of a woman who no longer feels the need to justify her actions. As Carolyn prepares the shortbread dough, the scent of butter and sugar beginning to fill the kitchen, her phone buzzes with another notification. It's Kelsey again. This time, it's another post. Another thinly veiled barb. A picture of a perfectly arranged holiday table. Soft lighting casting long shadows over the gleaming silverware, the gold-tinted wine glasses catching the light just so. Kelsey's caption is just a little too pointed. Some people punish you for what they can't control. Carolyn looks at it for a long moment. The words sting, but not in the way Kelsey thinks they will. It's more of a dull ache, like a knot being slowly unraveled. Carolyn doesn't reply. She doesn't need to. Kelsey's words are empty now. Trivial, even. Instead, Carolyn sets the phone down on the counter and continues rolling out the dough, her hands working with the same practiced precision. The shortbread will bake in silence, and Kelsey's message will drift away like a whisper in the wind. She doesn't need to engage anymore. She's already made her point. The doorbell rings, its suddenness pulling her from her thoughts. Carolyn wipes her hands on her apron and walks calmly to the door. When she opens it, she finds a familiar face standing there. Marla, pie still in hand, but with a twist. This time, there's no humor in Marla's eyes, only that look of someone who's seen the drama unfold and is waiting for the fallout. From Nathan, Marla says, holding out a check. Unsigned, late, and entirely predictable. It's exactly what Carolyn expected. Half-hearted. A token of appeasement that means nothing in the long run. But Marla's tone is laced with something else now, something sharp. I think he wants to make peace. But it's not really peace, is it? Carolyn takes the check, her fingers brushing the edge of it. She doesn't even bother looking at the amount. It's irrelevant. She feels the weight of it in her palm, the emptiness of it. She walks over to the kitchen trash can and drops it in without a second glance. The shredding of the check is symbolic, but it feels right. There's no more room for half measures, no space left for gestures that don't come with meaning. Marla watches her, then turns back to the pie she's brought. That's not peace, Carolyn. That's PR. She says it with a rueful smile, as if acknowledging something Carolyn has long known, but never said aloud. Peace, after all, isn't the goal. Accountability is. And Carolyn is finally holding the people who've hurt her accountable. They share a quiet moment in the kitchen, the only sounds the soft scrape of the spatula as Carolyn smooths the dough into the baking pan and Marla begins to hum low under her breath. The scent of shortbread fills the air, the fragrance rising like a quiet, steady affirmation of everything that's been done. When Carolyn opens the oven to check the cookies, she pauses for a moment, considering the weight of the decisions she's made. The letter to Nathan and Kelsey is only the beginning. She has set a new standard, a new way of being, and there's no going back. This isn't just about her family. It's about respect, boundaries, and reclaiming what is rightfully hers. The doorbell rings again, but this time, Carolyn doesn't even flinch. She doesn't need to rush. Instead, she pulls the shortbread from the oven and lets the golden cookies cool on the counter. As the doorbell rings one last time, Carolyn smiles softly to herself, knowing that whatever comes next, she's the one in control. She'll open the door when she's ready. The morning is quiet. The lights softening as the first rays of dawn break through the windows, but Carolyn is already wide awake. The house is still, almost peaceful, save for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the faint tapping of her feet against the hardwood floor as she walks from room to room. The weight of the changes she's made is heavy now, but it's not just the estate or the house itself. It's everything that's happened, everything that's been set in motion. The house, her home, feels different now, as though it's standing guard over her new boundaries. She moves to the front door, her fingers brushing against the cold brass doorknob. The thought crosses her mind, a fresh start. But that requires action. With steady hands, she pulls out her phone and taps in the code. The doorbell chimes faintly, but that's not the sound she's listening for. It's the clean, final click of a new code locking in place, an invisible barrier. She's changed it. She's not waiting for anyone anymore. No one will have the privilege of just showing up unannounced. Not anymore. Not after everything. A small, satisfied smile tugs at the corners of her mouth as she walks away from the door, making her way down the hallway to the front room. The next part of her plan comes together as easily as her decisions have in the past few days. The sound of the gate's creaking hinges rings out in the distance. Carolyn stands for a moment by the window, watching as a fresh, sturdy iron gate is installed at the end of the driveway. It's not just for privacy, though that's certainly part of it. It's a clear line, a visual reminder of the boundaries that have been set. A gate to protect not just her property, but the space she's carved for herself in this world. She won't be walked over anymore. Marla, who has been an accomplice in all of this, her closest friend, her partner in so many ways, steps beside her, holding a binder with a thick stack of papers. The guest entry protocol, Marla announces, her voice light, though there's an edge of amusement in it. Might need a few more revisions, but I think we've got the basics down. Carolyn looks down at the binder in Marla's hands. It's a methodical collection of guidelines. RSVP required. No guests without prior approval. No disruption or disrespect to the host. Marla's handwriting in the margins is as sharp as her eye for detail. Carolyn's lips curve into a small, approving smile. Perfect, she says, her voice low but certain. Let's make sure everyone knows what happens if they forget the rules. Marla's eyes gleam with something darker, a quiet satisfaction of her own. They'll remember all right. She flicks the binder closed with a definitive snap, and then follows Carolyn toward the back door, ready to handle whatever's next. As Carolyn sips her coffee, the sound of a new email notification dings through the silence. She picks up her phone, her brow furrowing slightly as she reads Roger's latest missive. I expect an apology for your actions. This has gone too far, and you know it. This needs to be addressed before we can move forward. Carolyn's grip on the phone tightens just a little, but there's no anger in her. Just a calm, measured response. She taps her fingers on the screen, composing her reply. Room 12 still open next Christmas. She doesn't need to say more than that. The line is drawn, and Roger will either understand it or not. It's not up to her anymore. She sets the phone down on the counter, but the feeling of his words still lingers in the air. But Carolyn doesn't let it weigh on her. Not today. She's done with their games. She's done with their manipulation. This was never about the holidays, or the seat at the table. It was always about respect. Later that afternoon, the doorbell rings again. This time, it's Nathan. He stands there, hands in his pockets, looking more frustrated than ever, his eyes tired. Carolyn watches him from the kitchen window, her body still and unmoving. She doesn't rush to open the door. The message is clear. He needs to make the first move, not her. Eli, who's sitting at the kitchen table, looks up as Nathan rings the bell again, his gaze steady but calm. They're learning. Slowly, Eli says quietly, his voice soft but filled with understanding. He doesn't need to say more. He knows what Carolyn has done, and he understands the significance of the changes she's made. Carolyn nods, her expression still firm but warm. They'll figure it out. Eventually. Nathan rings the doorbell one last time. His frustration is evident, but Carolyn doesn't move. Not yet. There's no need to rush. She has the power now, and Nathan's long overdue for learning what it means to respect boundaries. He'll have to wait. In the distance, the sound of the gate closes softly, sealing the entrance, and Carolyn watches from the window. The world is changing. The family she once tried so hard to please is now the one that must prove itself to her. And for the first time in a long while, she feels the weight of her choices settle with a quiet satisfaction. The quiet hum of the office is almost soothing, a contrast to the storm of decisions that have been building in Carolyn's mind. The papers in front of her are the culmination of everything. Everything she's fought for. Everything she's sacrificed. Her fingers hover over the final estate trust documents, her eyes flicking between the lines of text, each one an irreversible mark on the future of her home, her legacy. The weight of it is palpable. Nathan and Kelsey will never know the full extent of the changes she's made, the decisions that she's laid out with such cold, deliberate care. She can almost feel their resentment from the other side of the door, but Carolyn doesn't flinch. They never did understand. She always gave, and they always took. But that's over now. She picks up the pen and signs her name, a simple motion that carries the weight of years of neglect and frustration. The trust is official. Eli is the sole beneficiary of her home now, with living use exclusivity. No one else will live here again unless he chooses to let them. Nathan and Kelsey have been barred from tenancy, management, or resale rights, completely cut off from any future claim to what was once their family home. This isn't just a legal document, it's a boundary. A line drawn in ink, one that can't be erased. With a soft sigh, Carolyn sets the pen down and begins filing away the documents into the folder, her movements slow and deliberate. She can almost hear the murmurs of Nathan and Kelsey now, the inevitable fallout, the complaints. But it doesn't matter. It never did. She stands up, stretching her arms above her head as the quiet satisfaction of the decision settles over her like a weight. The house is protected now. The future is protected. The world they once took for granted has changed, and no amount of pleading, no lawyer's letter, no manipulative message will change that. Marla enters the room just as Carolyn steps away from the desk, her arms crossed, the familiar glint of approval in her eyes. She's been here through every step of this, a quiet force in the background, always in the know, always supportive. "You made your boundaries generational," Marla says with a smirk, eyes scanning the papers in front of her. "They'll never be able to touch this now." Carolyn's lips twitch with a satisfied smile, though her gaze remains focused on the papers in front of her. "I made my seat permanent," she responds simply, the finality in her words enough to convey the depth of what she's done. She's not just protecting a home, she's protecting her place in the world. Her voice is steady, calm. No more compromise, no more appeasement. The doorbell rings once more, a faint chime in the distance, but Carolyn doesn't turn toward it. There's no need. She's made her decision. She's set the boundaries. And now, they'll have to live with them. The idea that anyone, especially Nathan and Kelsey, could walk in and take what's hers again is laughable. They're the ones who've crossed lines. She's only reclaiming what was always rightfully hers. Marla raises an eyebrow, noticing Carolyn's lack of reaction to the doorbell. "You're not answering?" she asks, a knowing smile creeping onto her face. Carolyn shakes her head, a quiet laugh escaping her lips. "Not yet," she says, her tone smooth, almost amused. "They've been trying to force their way in for far too long. Let them wait." Marla chuckles softly, leaning against the doorway as she watches Carolyn move back to the counter, where she picks up a freshly baked batch of shortbread. She places a few on a plate, arranging them with a quiet precision, the simple act grounding her in the moment. It's not about control anymore. It's about peace. Her peace. The doorbell rings again. This time, Carolyn doesn't even look up. "We'll see if they understand what respect means now," she says, her voice laced with finality. The doorbell rings again, the sound growing more insistent, but Carolyn takes her time. The world on the other side of the door has changed, and she's the one who's changed it. Outside, the gate at the end of the driveway remains firmly in place, a visible line they can't cross. It's a symbol, an unspoken warning. The rules have shifted. The ones who used to take, the ones who used to demand, will have to prove their worth. For the first time in a long time, Carolyn feels like she's finally been heard. Carolyn places the last envelope on the countertop, its crisp white surface gleaming in the dim light of the room. The card inside is simple, formal, nothing more than a quiet rejection of what once might have been. The words are perfectly composed, just as they should be. "Regretfully declines your presence." She watches the envelope for a moment, the weight of it suddenly heavier than expected. This is the end of an era, the polite rejection of the family she once knew. No more pretending. No more forcing herself to fit into a space where she no longer belongs. She slides the card back into its envelope and seals it with deliberate care. The message has been sent. There's nothing more to say. She doesn't need to explain herself to them. Not anymore. The boundaries have been set, and there's no going back now. In the next room, Marla is standing by the fireplace, a glass of wine in her hand, watching Carolyn with an almost conspiratorial smile. "You know," Marla says, lifting her glass in a quiet toast, "that's the real silent night." Carolyn's lips twitch, and she raises an eyebrow, turning her attention to her friend. "It's the only one that matters," she replies, her voice steady but carrying an edge of something deeper, something beyond the surface. She's done with the noise, the drama. This year, there will be no forced smiles, no awkward holiday dinners. This year is different. Marla clinks her glass gently against Carolyn's, as if acknowledging the victory in this silence, the one they've both earned. "You've got it all under control," Marla says, her tone full of quiet approval. She leans back against the mantel, her eyes never leaving Carolyn. "It's the kind of peace you've been fighting for, isn't it?" Carolyn nods once, her gaze turning toward the window, where the outside world is blanketed in a thin layer of frost. "I'm tired of fighting," she murmurs, though the words are not about surrender. They're about something else, something quieter. Now it's just about living. Later that afternoon, Eli joins her in the living room, a box of ornaments under one arm. He's been so calm through all of this, so steady, and his presence is a reminder that, despite everything, there is still joy to be found. Together, they begin decorating the tree, stringing lights and hanging ornaments, the simple, familiar task offering a sense of calm that Carolyn hasn't felt in years. The house comes alive in a way it hasn't before, just the two of them, working side by side, filling the space with the kind of warmth that has always been hers to give. Carolyn finds herself smiling more than she has in years, the laughter light and unforced, a stark contrast to the strained holiday dinners of the past. She looks at Eli, watching him hang the last ornament on the tree, and she realizes how much has changed. They don't need anyone else to make this Christmas complete. Not anymore. A few days later, Kelsey's post appears on her feed. An old photo from a family dinner years ago, a picture of a time when things seemed simpler. The table is full, the smiles are bright, the family all gathered together. The caption reads, "When things were simpler." Carolyn pauses, her fingers hovering over the screen. The words sting, but not in the way Kelsey expects. She doesn't need to revisit the past to know the truth. She's moved on. The family she once tried so desperately to keep together is gone now, and Carolyn isn't chasing after it anymore. Her fingers move across the screen as she types one simple word in the comments section. Clearer. The word sits there, hanging in the air like a final statement, an acknowledgement of everything that has happened. The past is no longer clouded with confusion. The future is her own, defined by her choices, by the peace she has created. She sets her phone down, feeling the weight of the moment settle in. The finality is undeniable. There is no turning back now. The boundaries have been drawn, and the world on the other side of that line can stay where it is. Carolyn doesn't need to chase after them anymore. Marla walks into the room, offering her a knowing look. "You're letting go, huh?" she asks, her voice softer now, as if sensing the shift in the air. Carolyn nods, her lips curving into a small, satisfied smile. "I'm not holding on anymore," she says, the words carrying the weight of everything she's done. "I'm finally letting go." Eli, who has been watching from the corner of the room, looks up at Carolyn with a quiet understanding. "It's different now, isn't it?" he says, his voice calm, but there's something in his eyes, a quiet strength, a knowledge of the journey they've been on together. Carolyn's heart swells with pride. "Yes," she says softly, glancing toward the window where the night is slowly settling in. "It's different now, and it's going to stay that way." The house feels like home again. It's been reclaimed, not by the memories of what it once was, but by the person who has finally taken her seat at the table, permanently. The dining room glows with soft light, the polished silver gleaming on the table, the crystal glasses catching the reflection of the flickering candles. There's a quiet dignity in the way the room has been set, each plate placed carefully, the linen cloth smooth and pristine. It's a far cry from the chaos of the past, the forced smiles and strained conversations. Tonight, everything is different. Everything has been reclaimed. Carolyn stands at the head of the table, her hands resting lightly on the edge. She takes a moment to look around, the familiar warmth of the room filling her chest. Marla and Eli are already seated at their places, the last of the potluck dishes spread out on the table in front of them. Neighbors are chatting softly, their laughter muted by the weight of the evening, but there's no tension here, no expectation, no demands. Eli passes the rolls to Marla, who accepts them with a smile, her fingers brushing his as she takes the warm bread. Marla's eyes glint with quiet approval, and Carolyn feels a flicker of pride. Marla, ever the steady presence, is the bridge between the past and the present. She's seen it all, stood by Carolyn through every difficult decision, every quiet battle. The turkey sits at the center of the table, golden and perfectly roasted, the scent of it filling the room. Marla picks up the carving knife and begins to slice, her movements smooth and practiced. It's an ordinary act, carving a turkey, but it feels like a symbol of something more, something Carolyn has worked for. This is her table now. This is her family, her choice, her reclaiming. She watches them, the quiet rhythm of the dinner unfolding with a kind of grace she hasn't known in years. Eli's laughter rings out at something Marla says, and Carolyn smiles to herself, her heart swelling with a quiet, deep satisfaction. She takes a deep breath, letting the peace of the moment wash over her. This is what it was all for. The chance to finally create a space where she could breathe, where she didn't have to apologize for her choices. Tonight, Carolyn begins, her voice clear. I want to raise a toast to the people who understand value, not just tradition. The room falls quiet for a moment, the weight of her words settling over the table like a quiet promise. Carolyn raises her glass, her eyes meeting Marla's and then Eli's. There's no need for more. The message has been sent, and it's understood. Marla clinks her glass against Carolyn's, her eyes sparkling with approval. To understanding, Marla says with a smile, her voice warm but tinged with something deeper, something unspoken. The evening stretches on, the conversation flowing easily, the clink of silverware and quiet laughter filling the air. But Carolyn watches it all with a sense of satisfaction, as if she's finally allowed herself to see it for what it is. Not a family dinner full of obligations or empty gestures, but something real. Something that's been built on respect, on boundaries that have been drawn and upheld. At the end of the table, a spare chair sits, empty, waiting. It's not there out of obligation. It's there because Carolyn has made the choice not to fill it. It's a subtle symbol, an acknowledgement that not everyone belongs at this table anymore. She doesn't need to explain it to anyone. As the evening draws to a close, Eli stands to help clear the dishes, his movements easy and familiar. Carolyn's gaze lingers on him for a moment, her quiet strength, her pride. He's the one who will carry this forward, the one who will make sure the traditions that matter, the boundaries that matter, remain intact. The doorbell rings. It's a familiar sound now, one Carolyn has heard too many times over the years, a sound that once symbolized intrusion, expectation, and unwelcome appearances. But this time, it's different. She knows who it is. She's not afraid to let it ring unanswered. Go ahead, Carolyn says, her voice barely above a whisper. Answer the door. Eli hesitates for a moment, his eyes meeting hers, but he doesn't ask. He knows what it means now. There's nothing left to say. They've made their choices. She watches him walk to the door, his steps slow, deliberate, and for the first time in a long while, Carolyn feels a deep, settled peace in her chest. There is no rushing, no forcing, no more waiting for answers. At Christmas dinner, her son said, "That seat's for my father-in-law." And Carolyn, with a quiet, steady smile, had made sure there was one reserved for him at the motel next door.